Hey, Mitch.
Oh, hey, Ed, how are you?
Yeah, good. I've got a really great topic for the show today.
What?
I said I've got a really great topic for the show today.
I can't hear you.
I said I've got a really great
Will
topic.
someone please keep that damn chicken quiet?
I've got a really great topic for today's show. Let's talk about MASH.
Oh, my God, Ed. You killed it. You killed it.
The chicken?
No, the topic. That's great. I can't wait to talk about it.
Awesome. Hi, this is Ed Dollister.
And this is Mitchell. And this is Mitchell A.S. Halleck.
And welcome to another episode of Mitch and Ed's Excellent Adventure. Before we begin today, a big thank you to everyone who has subscribed and has been watching the show. Our last episode out is All You Need to Know About Knight Rider. So if you're a fan of the Hoff and Kit, check that out. But also a big thank you to everyone who has subscribed. We're well over the 300 subscribers now. We're just heading towards that magic 500 where I get to drink some 1999 Pepsi soda. How about that? 500. That's pretty good. What have you got?
Is it 1,000? Did I get to drink this?
Yep. Why not?
Mountain Dew.
Tastes like Rune Hako. So.
This is from the Phantom Menace collection. Mountain Dew from 1999.
Anyway, so thank you very much. But hey, Mitch, how do people subscribe or get notified?
Well, it's funny you should ask, Ed, because it's simply by hitting that button that appears just before us right now. Subscribe. And if you click on the bell, which is the notification, you'll get notified when there's a brand new adventure of me and Ed as we trek back into time and talk about TV, movies, toys, and more.
And we're heading back this time to the Korean War, back to not the 1950s, but 1972 as we talk about MASH.
Yes, Ed. Actually, we're going back a little bit before 72. We're going to go back to the late 60s when there was a book written by Dr. Richard Hooker. That's his nom de plume. That's his real name. But anyway, it was called MASH, the story of three doctors.
Yep.
And it was a hit. It was a recollection about this surgeon who was back in the Korean War, and he was assigned to a mobile army surgical hospital, aka MASH. And it talked about the things that went on behind the scenes, because as we all know, Ed, those were civilian doctors. Those were not military men. Those were basically, the guy down the street who suddenly
local GP or what have you, or a surgeon.
Yeah. Next thing you know, they're in olive drab and sitting there a couple miles away from the actual battle zones. And that's a different way of life. You can't turn these guys into soldiers. And sure enough, that's what happened, Ed.
Yep.
Yeah. And then I was going to say it was such a big hit, they went ahead and make a movie. In fact, some of the people might know Otto Preminger, a.k.a. Mr. Freeze from the Batman show, was the producer. And he hired director Robert Altman to make a movie based on the book MASH, which most people thought was a satire of the Vietnam War, which was still raging on. And in a weird way, it kind of was, but they got around it by saying it was the Korean War. And they're like, oh, okay, that's different. It's not Vietnam, it's Korea. So people weren't that swift on the uptake back then.
That's right. And the movie came out in 1970. Donald Sutherland, Elliot Gould, Tom Skerritt.
Robert Duvall,
yep.
Sally Kellerman, Tom Skerritt. You got Gary Berghoff, one of the only characters who appears in the movie and then the TV show is Radar O'Reilly.
Oh, apart from the actor playing General Hammond, he was in a few episodes as well from that, but sort of disappeared. But it was a huge hit. And they were going to try and make a sequel. There was another book, MASH Goes to Maine, I think.
There's actually a bunch of those books. Yeah. And there was MASH Goes to Moscow, MASH Goes to Maine, MASH Goes to you name it. And they're not really like the characters that were in the TV show. In fact, that irritated the author very much so, because his interpretation of Hawkeye is not what Alan Alda did with the character. And he was very outspoken for years. He'd come out and say, that's not my Hawkeye Pierce. My Hawkeye Pierce is a a hard drinker, womanizer, and a staunch conservative too. There's actually a weird line in one of the MASH sequels where it says Hawkeye would go down to college war protests and beat up anti-war protesters. That's not something I could see Alan Alda
Not
ever
at
doing
all.
on the show. Like, yeah, let me go beat up some commies. Not gonna happen.
Well, the film, like for me, I mean, I didn't realize there was a film. When I was watching the TV series MASH, I thought the MASH was an original thing. So it's quite interesting. I remember going back going, oh, there's a movie. Okay.
Yeah.
This was a long time ago. So I thought, okay, I'll go watch it. And it's quite different to the MASH TV series we know and love. The characters.
Yeah.
It's a lot more. I mean, for you guys, it'll be an R-rated movie. It's quite.
It was. Yeah. It was one of those things. It was very controversial. It was a big hit. Let's just say that. But it was one of those things where it was irreverent, because of the way, even the filming style, the Robert Altman filming style, he has kind of like what we do here on the show, overlapping dialogue sometimes, but that's all scripted. A lot of folks think that was all improv on the set and everybody was making it up as they go. But
just
no,
like us,
actually,
this is all scripted.
It's all done perfectly. No, but it was one of those things where all the actors knew what they were going to say. And he actually had the microphone go through the crowd. So you would pick up eavesdropping, like real conversations. Like these guys are talking about an operation. These guys are talking about a nurse. These guys are talking about a football game. And as it just went through the crowd, your ears would just pick up different sounds. So you were kind of immersed into that environment. And then they were also very, very realistic when it came to the surgery.
Yes.
They were like amputating people, and there was blood squirting everywhere. And it wasn't the real pretty Hollywood, hospital movies type of thing. It was showing how horrific, actual war would be, and, people getting shot. So again, not the things, but like I said, it was a huge hit, and they didn't do the movie sequel, but they did immediately. No, 20th Century Fox said, hey, you know what? We've got this show. Why don't this movie? Why don't we try making a TV show? Which it's been done before. I mean, you had McHale's Navy was a movie and then a TV show. And then No Time for Sergeants was another like army type of thing. And then they made a TV show.
Well, you had Batman, they did a movie version of Batman.
Yeah. But most of the times they weren't that successful. I got to say on the whole, it was always The Ghost of Mrs. Muir. There's the movie and then there's the TV show, which is actually pretty good. But the MASH show was different. And like I said, they offered all the people that were in the movie a chance to be on TV. And it was still back when Hollywood had that little aversion from movie actors being TV actors, because that was kind of a symbol or a sign that your career was going in the toilet.
It a little bit.
Yeah, you weren't going to work again. So they all said no. I mean, even Tom Skerritt, whose character doesn't even appear in the show, he was Duke Forrest.
Yep.
They asked him, and he said, no, I don't want to do a TV show. And then they just wrote his character out of the show. But he went on to be in Alien and Cheers, and Tom Skerritt's had a huge career. I don't even think people realize he was even in MASH.
It is seen a bit of as a downturn for your career to go onto TV. But the person who did take up the mantle was Gary Berghoff, who was, I suppose, the pivotal to the series.
Connecticut's own, from Bristol, Connecticut. Right up the street from me here.
Yep.
Anyway, yes, he did. He was also known for.
I better grab my radar while I'm
Teddy.
Teddy.
But he was also known because he played Charlie Brown on Broadway in the play You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, and that's how he got noticed, Ed. That's how he got his audition.
You know what? I could see him playing that, actually.
Playing Charlie Brown. Yeah, that's how they first saw him. And so they saw him on stage, and they went backstage and they met with him. And then he tells a story like a couple years later, he got a call from Otto Preminger's brother, and he went out to Hollywood, and he didn't even know what it was for, but it was because of that. They saw him in the play, and they brought him in. I'm trying to think. Sally Kellerman, who a lot of Star Trek fans will remember from the first Star Trek, because she's in Where No Man Has Gone Before, which I believe is like the first one they normally run, even though I think it was the third. You know what, Gary Mitchell?
Yes.
AKA Gary Lockwood, when he gets the powers. That's Sally Kellerman. She was Hot Lips Houlihan in the movie. And then Robert Duvall, talk about a big movie career. He went on to a zillion movies, and he played Major Frank Burns in the movie. So
that's right.
Everybody in that movie, when you go to watch it, it's kind of cool because you'll see them later on in Donald Sutherland. My goodness, he was in zillion movies, and Elliot
Yes.
Gould is still popping up there. I mean, they were really big at the time in the
Yep.
early 70s. I remember seeing another movie directed by Irving Kershner, who went on to do The Empire Strikes Back. It was called Spies.
Now,
Spys.
yes,
Yes.
and which was in fact they did Spies, the logo for
Mhm.
Spies. They used the asterisks like
Yep.
they did on MASH to try and tie it in. And they said, Elliot Gould and Donald Sutherland back since the first time since MASH, and that film
Yes.
flopped.
It did.
Yeah.
I did. The funny thing is, I had two older sisters, and I remember they were all into Elliot Gould and Donald Sutherland. So I knew about MASH from those guys. Because, like I said, at the time, Elliot Gould was a huge star.
Mhm.
He was even married to Barbara Streisand at one point. I mean, that was a pretty big deal back then. So he, I'm trying to think, he went on to do like Sam Spade. He did some detective movies
Yes.
and stuff. His career kind of went weird, but he was a big deal back then. But I remember the movie MASH being on the CBS network. I think it was a Friday night. It was almost at the end of summer, early September here. It was a big deal, a premiere. It's like tonight, CBS Movies presents MASH. And it was
Yep.
on from like 8 to 11. It was like a 3-hour thing.
Yes.
But they edited the heck out of
I
it
bet.
because it was a rated R movie. The language was there. There was sex in it. There was the blood and the gore. I just remember my sisters watching it. And then they said, coming soon, a TV show based on the hit show. And so when you watch the first episode, it's very similar to the movie. They try
Mhm.
to try to have the same look and the feel to it. Like you mentioned, they bring General Hammond in, who's played by G. Wood.
Yes.
He's a bald actor. He's the same guy. So they're trying to get that continuity. And Radar's totally different. You want to talk about characters
Yep.
that change over the years? In the beginning, he's kind of like a streetwise, I don't know, how do you want to put it? Like a punk kind of kid. He's
Mhm.
drinking booze, he's smoking cigars, he's chasing girls. He's not the Radar that evolves,
Yep.
that becomes this like wholesome, all-American, teddy bear loving, goody two shoes. That happens years later. So it's really weird. And I'm trying to think what other character changes were. Hawkeye and Trapper were kind of interchangeable when the show first started. Henry Blake, played by McLean Stevenson, he was just in the background. Actually, McLean Stevenson auditioned to play Hawkeye Pierce,
Mm.
which is very odd because he's a lot older, and you
Yes.
just can't picture that. You're like, really? He was going to be him? But
Well,
they said,
Wayne Rogers also auditioned for Hawkeye Pierce, and then I thought that he didn't like his sarcastic or cynical
yeah,
look at the world, so he thought that Trapper John would be a better fit for him. So I
Wayne
mean, we can,
Rogers, another.
yeah,
I was
well,
going to say,
let's talk about the cast. Obviously,
yeah,
Benjamin Hawkeye Pierce from
Franklin,
Franklin,
Benjamin Franklin, Hawkeye
yes,
Pierce.
from
Yes,
somewhere I always wanted to visit, Crab Apple Cove.
it's not real. There's
I
no thing. There's a
know,
Maine.
but
There's a Maine, but there's no Crabapple
it
Cove.
sounds like such a wonderful, wholesome, all American, classic town. Isn't that somewhere near Connecticut? Come on.
Well, it's funny you should say that, Ed, because Maine is north of Connecticut
Yeah.
here, and
Okay.
no, Maine is a lot of trees and few people, but it's got that old New England. And for a guy that was from New England, he had a weird New York, Long Island accent. Alan Alda. He talked
Yeah.
a lot like Stan Lee, which is weird. No, but the thing of it is, Alan Alda's character. Originally, if you watch the show, they kept saying he was from Vermont, which is another state, which is still in New England, but it's
Mhm.
not Maine. It's nearby. And then we had, and like I said, Alan Alda was a stage actor. He was in some movies. He had a
But he
lot
wasn't a
of,
big, he wasn't a
no,
well-known
no.
performer at that stage.
I saw him in a TV movie called Isn't It Shocking, which was weird. It was like he was a detective in a town and people were getting electrocuted. And it was one of those things you'd see on the local TV, but he was always a good actor. And his dad, Robert Alda, was a big vaudevillian actor. He was
Mhm.
one of the song and dance mans that would travel the country and, put on a show as like an entertainer. Cause my mom and my grandmother knew Robert Alda. They go, "Oh, Robert Alda, the actor." And if you go
Yep.
look in some movies, he'd be in there. And Wayne Rogers is really funny. You can look on YouTube.
Mhm.
He was in a lot of Westerns because he was around for a long time. There was the Purina dog food Western hour, and they had a commercial where they were trying to get people to watch the show. And they go, "Here's the star of the show, Wayne Rogers," and he's playing Colorado Jack or something like that. And he shows up and he's got this cowboy sound to him, and he's got the cowboy outfit and the hat on, and it's got to be like 1962, and he was the star of it. And he's
Mhm.
like, Hey, y'all, this is Wayne Rogers. I want you to watch my new show where I'm going to be on every week, and there's going to be dogs on the show because it's sponsored by the Purina Dog People. And they bring the dog on, and you can see his face. You're like, what? But he's also in Cool Hand Luke,
Ah,
which is the Paul Newman movie, the
yep.
prison movie. If you watch that, you'll see Wayne Rogers in the background. And it's kind of cool because you go, hey, I know that guy. That's going to be Trapper John MD over
Yep.
there, too. So when he took the character of Trapper John, Wayne Rogers did, which was Elliot Gould's character.
Mhm.
And the funny thing is, if you look at the movie, those guys did not look like somebody from 1950 because they look very 70s or 60s. They had the thick
Yes.
mustache, the long sideburns, and
Yep.
Donald Sutherland had the hat and the glasses on for the whole movie. They didn't look like they were like Richie Cunningham's dad or something like
No,
that.
I think they played with context a little bit, at the time. But we
Yeah,
also
there was a
had. Sorry, I was just going to say Larry Linville, who was Frank Burns.
Frank Burns,
With
yes.
thin lips, ferret face, I suppose you could
Ferret
call him.
face, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, now the funny thing about him, he's another guy that you see on a lot of shows because I saw him on The Night Stalker
Yes, he
with
was.
Darren McGavin. He's the beginning of the movie after they killed the showgirl in Vegas. They're doing an autopsy, and it's one of the interesting shots. The camera's coming up from the body like a cadaver cam, and looking over, you see the medical examiners looking in there, and they can't find any
Yep.
blood. And it's Larry Linville. And years later, I met him here in Connecticut, and I told him, I said, I remember you. And he knew the character's name. He's like, oh
Yep.
yeah, I played Doctor blah blah blah. And he just went on with talking about the Night Stalker movie, which is like, okay. And
That's
then he
pretty
actually
cool.
showed up on the TV show too,
Yep.
the Night Stalker, but he was a good one. And then you had Loretta Swit, who was
Hmm.
playing Hot Lips Houlihan, Major Margaret Houlihan. Uh, she was in one of those staples on TV. She was actually in another show at the time. I can't recall of it, but she was a regular at another. Uh, I think it was a CBS detective show or a hospital show. And then let's see. Oh, there was a different Father Mulcahy.
Yes, there was.
Yeah, it's not Rene Aubergenois who was in the movie
Yep.
that we'll all know as Odo from
Hmm.
Star Trek Deep Space Nine and also Benson, but they got a guy named George Morgan who's still alive and he lives not up the street from me. He lives over in Martha's Vineyard. He's
Okay.
a local actor, but George Morgan is the original Father Mulcahy. He had the red hair. You actually saw him on every episode for 11 years as Hawkeye runs up to the helicopter pad when the wounded are coming in.
Yep.
There's a guy running behind him with a whitish hat. That's actor George Morgan as Father Mulcahy. They just left him in the background. So technically, he was on the show.
I'm sure he
Cool.
was happy to get those residual checks.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then rounding out the cast was Henry Blake, played by McLean Stevenson, who was
Mhm.
also another guy that was on a lot of TV shows. He was known mostly for his role on the Mary Tyler Moore Show. He
Mhm.
played a tennis pro. He showed up a couple times.
Yep.
But his claim to fame is his relative was Adlai Stevenson, who was a politician who actually ran for president.
Mm,
And he was actually the vice
okay.
president, too.
Oh,
So there you go.
I didn't
That's
know that.
everything you need to know about the first
Oh,
cast of MASH.
don't forget Jamie Farr.
Well, he doesn't come on as
I
a regular
know.
until years later, but he showed up and he thought he originally had a one
Mm,
episode deal as Corporal Klinger, and it was such a good, a big hit. They brought him back. And the funnier thing is, if you go watch episodes of Hogan's Heroes, you
yes.
will see Jamie Farr and William Christopher, who plays Father Mulcahy, together on an episode of Hogan's Heroes. Plus, they're in a movie together.
Oh,
Yeah, they played hippies of all things. It's like one of those things. It's like, yeah, put a wig on them. And I can't remember the movie, but they're in another movie together in a scene with like a protest sign and stuff. And Jamie Farr's career goes all the way back because he actually served in the army during the Korean War, as
mhm.
did Alan Alda. He was also in the service. They, Jamie Farr worked with Danny Thomas and Red Buttons. I don't know
Yep.
if you know
Yeah, I
Red
do.
Skelton. Red Skelton, I'm sorry, it was Red Skelton. He was a comedian and he toured and did the USO shows for the troops. And Jamie Farr worked with him. So he was actually in Korea for quite some
Mm.
time, entertaining the troops and stuff. But no,
Well,
it was a good show, but it didn't do well. Ed.
no. The first season, I'm surprised it actually didn't get axed after the first season because it didn't rate well or anything like that. But they had faith in it. You had some fantastic creatives. You had I think it was Burt Metcalf and Larry Gelbart.
Well, Gene Reynolds. And
Yeah.
Larry,
Oh, yes. I'm thinking
Burr
of
comes in later on.
yes.
Yeah.
Who did he did a funny thing happened on the way to the forum. It was a new kind of show in that it wasn't a comedy, really.
No,
It was
no.
you know, I think you'd call it now a dramedy, I think is the term. But you know, the studio wanted to have a laugh track. They resisted having a laugh track, so they said, okay, well, look, we'll only have a laugh track as long as we're not in the operating theater. So there's no laugh tracks in the operating theater. It was really it's a thought-provoking, you know, series. I always call MASH like a bit of a warm blanket because it's still on today, showing in Australia. You turn it on and you know what you do? It just feels like you got this lovely warm blanket. You know, you get in for a, you know, great performances, great writing, thought-provoking stories. And it was lucky. I'm glad that it survived to season 2, where the ratings started to pick up. But that's when we started to get a sense that maybe there's going to be some changes later on, because we did lose Trapper John in
what
season
happened
3.
Yeah, I was going to say what happened is it was on Sunday nights against the Wonderful World of Disney. Even as a kid, I watched Walt Disney. I didn't watch MASH because it was like, you know, come on, man, it's Disney. So the William Paley, who was the president of CBS, his wife really liked the show. And, you know, when the wife of the owner of the network likes your show, you figure out something to do. So she's like, don't cancel it, because it really was going to get canceled. So they said, let's move it. So they moved it to Saturday night, and they put it in a lineup that you could be the worst show in the world and you would have got somebody to watch it. It was on after All in the Family.
Yeah.
Then there was the Mary Tyler Moore Show. Then it was MASH. Then it was the Bob Newhart Show. Then it was the Carol Burnett Show. So on Saturday night, nobody left their TV. You literally sat there from 8 o'clock to 11 o'clock for 3 hours and just had all-star comedy. And that's when MASH really took off. In fact, if you watch the season opener of the second season, they introduced all the actors again. It says, oh, assigned to the show is Alan Alda as Hawkeye, Wayne Rogers Trapper, because they knew they were trying to capture a whole new audience that might not have watched them. There was no DVRs or VCRs or downloads and all that. You either watched it or you didn't. So they had to re-educate people. So the show went, you know, through the roof, and then it became this huge hit. Season 3, huge hit. It starts having the rumblings when McLean Stevenson doesn't want to be, you know, one of 3 guys, because the show started to evolve and it became obvious that Alan Alda was becoming the star of the show, even though it was an ensemble. You know, they started writing more for Alda, and Wayne Rogers was kind of getting tired of being the second banana in the background. He loved the guy. I mean, Alda and Wayne Rogers were close friends offset for years up until his death. They were the best of buddies, but you also
he just didn't want to play
guy.
second fiddle. And
And then what happened is once McLean Stevenson said, I'm out of here, Wayne Rogers never signed his contract because there was a clause in it, a morality clause, because the studios would have things like, well, we saw you were at a protest and we saw you were dating this woman and she's like, you know, we don't like her and you're out. So because of that, where it was very broad and it wasn't specific, he said, I'm out of here. He just left. And then they were literally about to start the show. They already had Harry Morgan cast as Colonel Potter.
And he had already appeared as a different character.
General Steele. He was on the season 3. It's fun to watch because you'll see McLean Stevenson and Harry Morgan in the same show, and you're like, hey, that's Colonel Potter and Colonel Blake together. But it was almost like an audition. They just saw how good, because Harry Morgan had a career that went all the way back to like the 40s. He's in Westerns. He's on TV. He's on Dragnet. He's on a show called like I Married Joan or something. He's been around forever. He's got a very distinctive look and a sound. And, you know, when you go to see, like, look, there's Harry Morgan. He's in movies with Jimmy Stewart and such. But the early scripts were all written for Trapper John. And then when he just up and left, they were like, oh, what are we going to do? And then they had to go cast the new guy, which was going to be BJ Honeycutt. And the funny thing is did you know the other actors that were in the final running for BJ Honeycutt?
No.
You ever see the movie Babe? The actor James Cromwell?
Yeah, the Aussie film, with the pig.
Yeah, the big farmer
and
guy.
He's
also
he's in Star Trek as
Zephyr Cochrane.
Yes,
the
that's
man who
right.
created the warp drive. Yeah. And First Contact. He's actually up for BJ Honeycutt. They don't use him. In fact, if you watch the show, there's an episode where he comes on as a friend of BJ's and he like falsified documents and BJ gets arrested and they think he's not really who he says he is. That was kind of like, oh, let's throw this guy a bone. We almost gave him a
Yeah.
job. So that. And then the other actor was a guy named Alan Fudge, who you might remember from a show called The Man from Atlantis,
Yeah.
or the episode of MASH where there's a soldier who's wounded and he thinks he's Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I do remember. Yes.
That actor, Alan Fudge, was also in the running to play BJ Honeycutt. But Mike Farrell, who was a TV actor who was on a lot of shows, I think he even appeared on The Rookies or a couple of things. He was another staple of early episodic TV. He gets the part.
Yep.
So he comes on the show. So yeah, when the fourth season starts, you just brought two major new characters, and that's not really something that happens on TV without
that usually happens in the final season of a show where something goes wrong and then the ratings decline. But just before we get on to that, I thought we should talk a little bit about Abyssinia Henry, which is a landmark episode, not only in MASH but in television history, where we find out that Henry Blake gets to go home, and you sort of think, oh, it's fantastic. And then of course we got that final scene where Radar comes in and gives the news that he didn't make it.
Yeah. And in fact, no one knew about that except for Alan Alda. The writers gave that last page of the script to Alda, so he knew it was coming. The others didn't. So the legend goes that was the first take. And then they just filmed everyone's reaction to it. And it was like, whoa, what happened? But then I've heard another story where something went wrong with the editing or the sound, and they had to have Gary Berghoff come in and do it again. But it was only 2 takes of that. Yep. But it's a very hard-hitting scene because TV, people didn't die on TV. I mean, it was like, somebody left the show, they just left the show. They got rid of Darren on Bewitched. They just got another guy to come in and play Darren, and they just didn't talk about it. It was like, oh, okay, that just happens. So I think a major event.
It was quite a shock. I know there was lots of complaints. People go, how dare you? This is a comedy show. You should just do that. And there was talk that in some, once it got aired later on, they just removed that final scene.
They did. Some of the syndication never showed that, which is really bizarre because it's a major story element. And it's like, oh, we're not going to show that. It's like, oh, Luke Skywalker, he didn't blow up the Death Star. We're not going to show you that part of the movie. It's like, how could you not show the end of what happened to the character? But they did it for years. That did not run, so very weird, isn't it?
So I know it's
what's funny,
it was a groundbreaking show. So
remember Cher? She's still around. Cher, the entertainer. She had a TV show and it opened, and I remember watching this as a kid.
I know.
Because tonight's guest is McLean Stevenson, and there he is in the full Henry Blake outfit with the fishing hat and the vest, and he's in a life raft. He's like, "Hey, I'm okay. It's okay. Look, I'm all right. I didn't die," because so many people were, like you said, were writing letters to the network. Like 1,000 people wrote in, like, "How could you kill that guy?"
But they wanted to show how war is such a futile and random.
Not everybody goes home. Yeah, that's what the whole point of the show was.
So we got the new season, BJ Honeycutt, who's quite different to Trapper John. He's a family man. He's very wholesome. I love BJ's character. I think it was a really good foil for Alan Alda. I just like Mike Farrell's got a really good, I don't know if you ever had a chance to meet Mike Farrell, but
I didn't. I was thinking about that last night of all the different characters.
He seems like a really nice, like his character that he's playing, a really decent kind of guy.
Also was a member of the service. He was in the Marines, believe it or not. He doesn't look like a Marine, but he served in the Marines. He's just one of those nice guys, and he's very big in political activism. I mean, he's always traveled the world and a lot of different causes and helping people that are downtrodden and being, victimized by their government and, political exiles and stuff. So Mike Farrell's done a lot way beyond just his acting. He's very
and still is.
He is. I mean, he's in his later years, but no, he's still flying around the world, and you'll see him like on the news trying to help some crime that's going on. So he was one of those kings. His character, see, I gotta be honest with you, I'm more of a early seasons of MASH. I'm more of like, my favorite episodes are the ones with Henry Blake and Trapper John, because they're so out there it really becomes a different show. I mean, we got to be honest with you. The fourth and fifth season are probably the most well written of all 11 years. Those are like consistently. There's not a bad show if you just watch those two seasons, and those are all the B.J. Honeycutt and the Colonel Potter ones. Everyone's hit out of the park. They're just like so good character stories and interesting topics and things that happen to the crew and the cast. But the first 3 years, maybe it's because it's so wacky. I mean, it's almost like an F Troop.
Yeah.
Gilligan's Island, Hogan's here. It's almost too out there. I mean, there's some scenes that happen in early MASH that you're like, they would never do that stuff.
Yeah.
Years later, you know?
Well, I think also once Alan Alder sort of took a bit more creative control, you know, there's at one point, he's the only actor to ever get an acting award, writing and directing award. I think maybe a Golden Globe, you know, so
an Emmy award.
So it sort of shifted, you know, tone a little bit and everything like that. But maybe I just remember those later episodes because I was a bit older at the time and I remember seeing those. Then around season 5,
I was going to say we forgot they also added Jamie Farr as part of the cast at that point. He becomes a regular. I mean, he was always on there, and Father Mulcahy will come on as William Christopher will come on as a regular as well later on. But then Jamie Farr rounded it out, and then they had Margaret Houlihan get engaged. So they broke up the whole Frank Burns. You know,
that's when when Larry Linville decided to leave. So they thought they'd spin that with Penop Scott, where he was this, you know, big athletic who he only just the actor only just passed away. I think.
Actually, there's two. Yeah, you're right. There were actually two actors that played Lieutenant Colonel Donald Penobscot as her fiance who becomes her husband. The actor who just passed away, he was also the son in Smokey and the Bandit.
Yes.
He was Jackie Gleason's son, Junior. Yeah, I think his name is Beeson Carroll, if I'm not mistaken. That might be him. And then there was another actor that played Donald Penobscot in another episode. So it is kind of odd. But yeah, the more famous of the two just passed away like a week or two ago. But the thing about Larry Linville's character, Larry Linville, we didn't talk about him much other than he was on some other shows like The Night Stalker. I go back now and watch him. He is brilliant. He is so funny. Because it's hard to play the villain, the jerk every week, but he just has facial gestures. I mean, you hate Frank Burns because he's, you know, bigoted. He's a jerk. He's a selfish bastard. He's always trying to do stuff. He's a horrible doctor. But the way Larry Linville plays him, there's like I don't know, there's almost an element of sympathy for the guy. You're like, he's a loser and a jerk, but he can't almost help it. You know, it's like he was never that cool, you know?
Yes.
He's kind of like a Ralph Malph, though Ralph Malph is not bad, but Ralph Malph was always that jerk that you were like, really, Ralph Malph? Come on. So when he leaves the show, he didn't want a big send off. They asked him, they said, do you want us to do like a farewell episode where he does stuff? And he says, no, I don't want to come back. So after 5 seasons, his contract's up. He doesn't come there. So they got rid of him off screen. In the opening of season 6, he goes crazy after Margaret gets married. He just goes off to Tokyo and he just starts attacking different women thinking that they're Major Houlihan, and you know, they just write him off. He gets transferred back to the States and he becomes a full colonel. They promote him and they put him in charge of a VA hospital, which is weird because in the movie MASH, that's kind of what happens with Robert Duvall's character. He has a mental breakdown when Hawkeye picks on him about sleeping around with Major Houlihan, and he just attacks him and beats him up, and then they ship him out after he has a breakdown. So kind of similar, but Larry Linville, unfortunately, he doesn't go off into a big after MASH career. He appears. I mean, you see him on the Love Boat. You see him on, I think, Murder She Wrote. You know, he does a lot of guest stars, but he died. You know, he was only 60 when he passed away. It's really ironic because I was just watching the episode the other day. It's called Dear Ma. They're always good about those letter episodes. Which is something because those are really easy for the writers to put out because they only have to write little segments. And they just string them together like, oh, the other day Ed was trying to you know, put flea powder on a koala while Mitch was had his hand stuck in a pickle jar. And all you do is write those little scenes, but you string it along as a letter. There was letters to Hawkeye's dad more than once. There was letters to Radar's mom. Even Klinger wrote to his uncle Abdul in one episode. But we never got one from Frank Burns. He never wrote home to his wife.
No.
But the thing of it is, in the letter episodes, Frank Burns is there, and Radar and Hawkeye are going around doing foot inspections to see if anyone's got foot fungus or something.
That's right.
And he goes to give Frank a physical, and Frank goes, "I've got a mole under my sternum. I think it's a tumor, and this and that." And it's ironic and very dark. But years later, the actor Larry Linville would get a cancerous tumor down in his sternum, and then it spread, and that's what I was like, "Ew, that's a very evil foreshadowing to reality there too." We forgot to mention when McLean Stevenson left, he was another guy that was promised a lot of things. He was going to be Johnny Carson's replacement on the Tonight Show. That didn't happen. Then the NBC gave him a show called the McLean Stevenson Show, which was a disaster. And then he became like a butt of joke in Hollywood because it's like you were on the #1 or one of the top 10 shows, and you left on your own volition. No one told you to leave. Because you wanted to be the star. And then he never got that star power again. He was on another show called Hello, Larry, which was a spinoff of Different Strokes, which was a bomb in another NBC thing. And McLean Stevenson just slowly fades out into the career. And then unfortunately, he passes away in his early 60s and recovering from heart surgery. He died in the hospital. I think he was only 64. And another weird thing, he dies the same day as the actor who played Henry Blake in the movie MASH. That's weird.
That is weird.
Look it up. They died the same time. It's like, what are the chances of two actors that play the same character dying the same day?
So we got new Colonel Potter. We've got BJ replacing Frank Burns. We've got Charles Emerson Winchester the third. Who I've my only MASH action figure.
That looks just like David Ogden Stiers. Look at that. Now, what did you think of that character? Because honestly, for years, he was my least favorite.
Well, you know what I liked? That they didn't fall into the trap of just getting a replacement, the same type of character. You know, BJ was different, Colonel Potter was different, and Charles Emerson, I'll just say Charles was quite different as well. And I thought that was good. And I think with all the characters, again, you had a really good character arc. You know, they didn't stay they really didn't stay the same. They, you know, they grew. Houlihan changed. Of course, Klinger, you know, changed. All these characters had really, you know, well-rounded characters, and I think I quite like that. And you know, Charles was annoying, that pompous, but he did have moments of, you know, when you think about the Chinese, the Korean, you know, the band, you know, there was moments, you know, his love of his sister, you know, through those letters and everything like that. I did enjoy his character. And the funny thing is also all the actors who replaced those characters, or, you know, came in, they ended up being on the show longer than those original characters.
The people that replaced,
you know, you got to remember that the MASH ran for 11 years. The Korean War ran for 3 years and 1 month and a few days. So
you go and explain the timeline of MASH. I think they had 9 Christmas episodes, a couple different New Year's Eve episodes, and you're like, well, how long was Trapper there? Like a week? And was Henry Blake there for like a month?
And they did an episode where it's a whole
year. Yeah. Colonel Potter played Father Time. Yeah. And you're like, wait a second, what year? And it was like saying goodbye to 1981 or 1951. Hello, 1952. And you're like, wait a second. So what?
They also did a real-time episode, which predated obviously 24 by many years, you know, where they showed it real time. A lot of innovation. Actually, I'll say quickly, one of my favorite episode is the Dreams episode. Where basically all the lead characters fall asleep and then you get an insight into their dreams. And I remember being absolutely freaked out by that was what I was thinking. Maybe our other opening could have been me with a fake arm that I was going to pull off, like Alan Alder's character, where he couldn't do the surgery, or there was Houlihan with all the blood on the wedding gown.
And then Major Winchester was the magician. BJ was dancing with his wife. I'm sure Sharon would have come downstairs for that.
Yeah. So
and then Colonel Potter was riding the horse. I was going to bring in my dog and try to
Yeah,
ride
that's
Harley.
right. You
What
could
we
have
do.
ridden Harley. That's right. I'm
You know what,
surprised there's
though?
not the picture of painting of your thumb in the background there somewhere.
There's a lot of weird stuff that happens on that show that you don't think of either when you're young or it doesn't make sense. They have scenes where like Radar, who's ESP, they don't really get into it much, but Radar O'Reilly is not only extrasensory repossession or repossession. He takes back things. He's a repo man. Not only can he tell the future, he's also a time traveler because Radar manages to read comic books that weren't printed for 20 years. And in one scene, the comic book changed covers as he was sleeping. They go to wake him up. He's got an Avengers cover. And then they cut back and he's got a different Avengers comic. So somehow he flopped it out. And then they talk about movies that aren't even made yet, like Godzilla movies that don't come out till 1954, but yet they're talking about them in there. There's no spell
Well,
check.
given they ran for 11 years, a few anachronisms, I think, cut them some
There's
slack.
also weird stuff like because Henry Blake's wife's name is Mildred, and then it comes Lorraine, and then Colonel Potter's wife's name is Mildred, and then Major Houlihan's dad is dead, and then he's alive, and then he's dead, and then he's alive, and he shows up on the show. Hawkeye has a sister and a mother at one point. They're become nothing because all he has is his dad.
Don't forget his brother Chuck upstairs.
Oh, well, yeah, they all went on the same thing with Chuck Cunningham. And then BJ's daughter, Erin, is just born when he gets shipped out, but then she's like 2 years old. And I don't know. You don't even want to get into the MASH timeline because your head will explode because it's all kind of inconsistencies about what's happening, when and where. But you got to let it go.
You got to let it go. MASH also had some fantastic recurring characters who were, again, background. I remember Nurse Kelly. You had Igor, the chef. Yes. You had
Rizzo.
Rizzo, who I remember from Police Academy. Colonel Flagg.
This Edward Winter, who was the CIA guy.
Only appeared in a few episodes.
6 episodes, but people think he was on a lot more, but he's only on 6 shows because his character was so funny. You're like, oh, Colonel Flagg's going to be on. That was one of my favorite. Whenever Colonel Flagg would show up. And then the other one that we loved is Dr. Sydney Friedman, who has a different name when he first shows up. It's not Sydney Friedman. It's Sydney something. And then they change his name. Can't remember. But the first time he appears, he has a different name. And then the same thing with Colonel Flagg. The first time he's on, he's not called Colonel Flagg. He has a different name. And then you're trying to retcon it in your head like he was probably undercover.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
But Sydney Friedman was a fantastic character. I mean, what if you had to see a shrink, I'd want to see him. He was such a
he was one of the people they wanted to be part of the show as a regular, but he turned the role down. He does appear every season. There's not one of the 11 years there's not a Sydney Friedman episode,
and he's obviously pivotal in the last episode.
Oh, especially the last episode. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm trying to think who else. There was Rosie from Rosie's Bar. They had a couple different actresses play her. Then there's a lot of guest stars. If we want to talk about MASH's guest stars, there was Jack Sue, who people might remember from Barney Miller, who played Nick Yamana, but he was on in the earlier episodes. There's Patrick Swayze, George Wendt, Shelley Long, another Cheers regular on there.
Ed Begley Jr.,
William Catt, the Greatest American Heroes, on the Christmas episode when Hawkeye comes down dressed as Santa Claus. Ronnie Howard.
Yes.
Richie Cunningham. Maybe he ran off because he plays a guy who's only 15 years old who went to join the service to impress his girlfriend. What's his name with the big pompadour? Ford Fairlane.
Andrew Dice Clay. Sun Tae-go, who played the Korean doctor who would later appear
a lot of
on
times.
He was you often see it's like a lot of shows. If you watch like I've been watching with Mission Impossible and things like that, you see Robert Loggia, whatever, turn up 4 times, different characters and things like that.
Mako is another actor who's on at least 4 or 5 times, the famous actor Mako. Yeah. And then I was gonna say Mrs. Tom Hanks is on there too. Rita Wilson.
Yep.
She's on there. Yeah. So it's kind of funny. It's also fun to watch some of the mistakes that happen besides the continuity things where Godzilla movies are there and Avengers comic books. But sometimes in the background, you'll see things. There's one episode where there's a Ford minivan driving in the distance. And that was the van that would take people from the lot to the ranch when they filmed on location out there at the Fox Ranch. So that van in the background that somehow traveled through time from the 70s.
It was radars.
It was radar. That was the truck. He was like Doctor Who. He was Corporal Who. No one knew. And then there's Hawkeye's wearing those blue tennis shoes that Paul Michael Glaser wore on
Yes.
Starsky and Hutch that were really popular, the blue with the white stripes, the
Yep.
suede ones. He comes walking through the set with one of those one day. There's some background folks, like maybe some crew members now and then you'll be watching it, and there'll be a guy in like khakis and a blue
Yep.
sweater with a headset. You're like, what's that guy doing there? So very odd that MASH has
That's bound to happen, you know, especially with
Yeah.
now, you know, TV shows that you know, you'd watch it once and that was pretty much it. You go, oh,
That was it.
fantastic, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
We can't not talk about a few things. Obviously, we've got Radar as teddy bear, which made it to the Smithsonian. Do you know Big Bird's name of his teddy?
His Radar.
Yep, that's it.
The funny thing is that teddy bear.
This is mine from a kid, as being a kid from a kid. So I can't. Yeah,
Sure it is. Sure it is.
It is Teddy.
You sleep with that?
That's for another episode.
No, the line is when they told Radar,
bring Alan Arbison and I'll talk all about my problems.
No, what happens is Frank Burns wakes up Radar and he has a teddy bear. He goes, "Don't tell me he sleeps with you." And Radar goes, "I'm trying to do better, sir." So it's a good line. But the thing of it is,
good lines.
That teddy bear disappears. Radar leaves the teddy bear when he leaves the show. When Gary Berghoff leaves the show, we forgot to mention that. He leaves. He wanted to leave in season 7, but they held it over to season 8.
Mm-hmm.
No offense to Gary Berghoff. Radar is one of my favorite characters of all time, particularly his performance, like I said during the show. Even when he was like that streetwise punk kid, it was always fun to watch Gary Berghoff because he just has great facial expression, like ooh-wee, you know, he's always reacting well. But his last 2 episodes, I have to say, he was just so either wanted to get out of that show or something was going on. There was one season or 2 seasons where Radar only appears like every other episode, like only half of them. There's like some contractual stuff going on, but he just looks so angry on that last episode when he finally gets there because his Uncle Ed dies and he has to go home to take care of the farm with his mother out in Ottumwa, Iowa. I don't know what it is. It's his choice to play the character. I mean, I'm not going to knock the guy. I'm not an actor, but whenever I saw that, I just like, wow.
Well, I think, at one point he's going, I don't want to wear the hat anymore. But they're going, but you're balding, so you're not going to look at the young that we.
Yeah, he had a perm. His hair was curly. It just was like, what's going on?
The one thing that a lot of people probably know, but you might not know, is he had problem with his hand.
Yeah.
And so if you sort of every time you see Radar, he was a little self-conscious about it. So he'd always be carrying something or, and
a clipboard, or they would cover it up.
It was very
funny thing is, I was going to say, I found out about that because not knowing the show, but there used to be here in the States, there would be like after school specials.
Yes.
And it was for kids and such. And Gary Berghoff appears on a show where it's a bunch of puppets and they're talking about people that have like deformity or something like that. So they don't look like everybody else. And, just accept people the way they are. And there's nothing to be afraid of. So he shows all these little kids in this particular show, his hand and how his fingers were. And he says, oh, look, and I have a career and I'm an actor and this and that, but it didn't hold me back. So I knew about that just by watching this after school special when I was like 10 or so, which was really cool because it's one of those things, most people would just, they didn't want to let, because Hollywood's very physical and superficial and it's always the good looking guy and the good looking woman. They don't want to have any imperfections and stuff. They're like the model of what the human aspect, the human figure should be. Exactly. But the thing is, no, that was really brave of him to do. And I always admire Gary Berghoff for coming out and doing that for kids, like letting people know, like, you don't go making fun of folks. So
no,
that was one thing. But yeah, when he left the show, I got to admit, the show really changed. I mean,
well, that's when Klinger sort of took over.
Klinger stopped wearing dresses and he fell in love with Soon Lee, who's played by, is it Axis Rosalind Cho? Who becomes on Deep Space Nine?
Yes, who's
Miles O'Brien's wife.
Keiko. Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, nobody wants to play the same part. They decided to end the show. MASH was not a ratings disaster. It was number 1 in the ratings every week it was on. It was like MASH.
Well, Harry Morgan said he could play Colonel Potter forever.
Well, we'll talk about that too. But the thing of it is, I mean, some of the actors, they were there 11 years. Like at the end of the show, it's only Alan Alda and Loretta Swit are the only two actors from the original episode all the way to the end. But they just wanted to go out. Alan Alda was doing movies, and Loretta Swit was doing TV and Broadway. Everybody had other things to go on. The only ones who didn't really have another gig lined up were Jamie Farr, Harry Morgan, William Christopher, because they went on to do after MASH.
Yeah. Do you want to? Are we talking spin-offs?
Yeah,
here,
I was gonna say. All right, well, we'll wrap up the season. So anyway,
Yeah.
it goes on. They do this big season finale, which is a 2.5-hour movie where they actually incorporated a real life event because the set out on the location at the ranch burned down. There was these wildfires out in Los Angeles, and the MASH set where the tents are just burned. I mean, it's there, and they wrote that into the show, the final episode, and they got an extra half hour.
Yep.
And that was the biggest show in TV history to this day. It's celebrating its 38th anniversary on February 28th. 110 million people, which was like half the country at that time, watched it, and no one left their set. So much so when it finally ended in New York, they actually had an alert because everybody ran to the bathroom to flush the toilet, to cry, or to go to the bathroom because they've been holding it in because they didn't want to see, or they wanted to see how it ended, that the water levels dropped so much.
I've heard that. I think that's an urban myth. I've got to.
No, it's not an urban myth. No, that's actually documented. They were like, because the water comes down from up north, down the aqueducts and stuff, and it was like, whoo, the water pressure just dropped. But everybody watched the last episode of MASH. It was one of those things. Even though that's not the one they filmed, they actually filmed an episode that showed before that where they bury a time capsule.
Yeah, that was
the
so,
last
which
one.
just shows what good actors they are, because you would swear that is the last time they ever saw each other.
Right, which is
set.
it's weird. No, that wasn't it at all. When they all say goodbye to each other, that was months earlier. They filmed that, and then they had to go back and do that.
And it's farewell, goodbye, farewell.
Amen. Yeah, that's the title of it.
It's quite an emotional episode.
It's got the most writers. Yeah, it's got the most writers of any episode. I think it's got like 8 or 9 writers on that one. And Alan Alda wrote it. He was part of that too. He wrote 31 episodes. I don't know if we mentioned that. Over the 250 something episodes of MASH, he did 30. He wrote 30 episodes. But you want to talk about if you watch the first episode of MASH, the pilot, and then a couple of the early episodes, you would never think of the character trajectory that's going to happen to everybody. I mean, after 11 years, it's nice that Margaret Houlihan's not Hot Lips anymore. They call her Margaret. They got rid of all that sexual innuendo and all that. She becomes a full-fledged, empowered character, which is great because it's still the 70s and the 80s, and women's lib is just, topical. It's not like, a given. And then Hawkeye, which was always weird to me too, is those guys would drink a lot.
Yes.
And then they never knew when the helicopters were going to come in with wounded or the trucks would show up, but yet they'd always be ready to go operate. And I was like, you'd have to be shot up or on morphine to not worry that your doctor's like,
yes,
I hope we can make this one work.
Yeah.
So that was always an odd thing that they were always drinking a lot on that show,
Well, they don't. I mean, one thing actually, we should talk about the swamp. The tent, which they had. I think they had an exhibition after the last
Smithsonian.
episode at the Smithsonian, where they recreated that. But the famous still that they have in there. There you go. There is. You look like you're coming out of the swamp with those effects.
I am. It smells terrible in there. We just found out where they buried Trapper John's underwear. So
that's where Spear Chucker was.
We forgot they wrote him off the show too.
Yes.
Oliver Wendell Jones.
Yes. Anyways, the last episode. So you find out. You get closure. You certainly find out what happened to some of the characters. I suppose the biggest shock was, and we alluded to it in our very well acted intro to the show. I think.
You want to tell me what you and BJ were talking about?
Same thing he always talks about.
What's that?
Fingers, smiles, teeth, booties.
Was there anything about that you found upsetting?
No, I'll tell you what I find upsetting is being in here. I want you to get me out of here. I don't care how you do it. You can put me on a plane, on a train, on a bus, on a slow boat to China. I'll go out on a mouse-drawn chariot. I don't care what.
A bus, huh?
Again with the bus? Why don't you subscribe to Arizona Highways and leave me alone?
It's more fun with you.
Keep that damn chicken quiet.
Then what happened?
Then I went back toward the front of the bus.
And what happened next?
There's something wrong with it. It stopped making noise. It just stopped. She killed it. She killed it.
She killed the chicken?
Oh, my God. Oh, my God.
Hawkeye and the trauma that he experiences on the bus with the chicken, which you find out is actually a child, which causes him to have a mental breakdown. You get the Father Mulcahy, who ends up losing his hearing.
A shell,
The irony of Jamie Farr Klinger, who's spent all this time wanting to get out of Korea, and he ends up staying. BJ gets to go, home, he rides off on the motorbike off into the
Which
sunset.
looks like, to this day, I always think that Mike Farrell almost got killed driving down that hill. If you see him go down there with that, I go, does he know how to ride that thing or what? Because his legs are all over the place.
You get radar coming in. I'm sorry, there were no survivors. So.
Exactly. No, and then Winchester leaves on a garbage truck for all his pomp and circumstances there, So there was that. And then
Colonel Potter
Major
on his
Houlihan
horse
gets promoted. What's that?
You got Colonel Potter on his
rides off on his horse. He goes and donates Sophie to a local farmer, so they'll take care of her. And then Winchester has the band. And then who else is there? And then Rizzo. They all, even the supporting cast got stuff. Igor becomes a pig farmer. Roy, who's one of the orderlies you see in the background, is a character, because if you watch all the years of MASH, you'll see certain people, like you said, Nurse Kelly's in the background. Igor's the cook in the background, and then there's Roy. Roy Goldman is the actor's name. He's there. He's a big bodybuilder. He was good friends with Arnold Schwarzenegger in real life. He's just there. And in the episode, he goes, I don't know what I'm going to do, because he really didn't know what he was going to do. That was like not acting. That was him. His last performances, he plays Hitler in To Be or Not to Be with Mel Brooks, because he was good friends with Mel Brooks. He was around for years. In fact, Gene Reynolds, we forgot to mention it, one of the producers of MASH and directed so many episodes. He was an actor in Hollywood. In fact, he goes all the way back to The Little Rascals. Which was Spanky and Alfalfa and Buckwheat and all those guys. If you look, there's a young Gene Reynolds as one of the Little Rascal kids. So it's interesting.
Was
Larry Gelbart?
Was Jackie Cooper on the?
Jackie Cooper was a Little Rascal as well.
Because he directed a couple of episodes of MASH. I know he
MASH,
and Alan
because he was
Alda,
friends with Gene.
I don't think they got along very well. He and Alan Alda, but
no, not Jackie Cooper, who we know as Perry White from the Superman.
That's how I know him.
Great Caesar's ghost.
Yeah.
No, and then there was a lot of, in fact, there's some of the directors on MASH that I talked about, a show called F Troop. Hy Averback, he was a director, and if you look on some of those old shows from the 60s, you'll see his name pop up a couple of times too. And we forgot to mention the song, the only song that's on network TV that got away with it, with a title called Suicide is Painless. The lyrics were written by Robert Altman's son, because they didn't have any words to it, and he just banged it out.
Well, it's funny. There are lyrics to the song, and I remember, here we go, during my theater days in probably 1982, 83, we did they did a little skit, and they ended it, and we all had to sing "Suicide is Painless," and it was the worst thing you could possibly sing. But actually, I was saying earlier that it is also a play. So I've got the play. This is the one-act play, but this is based on this has got Duke in it and everything like that. So it's an actual
Duke Forrest.
It's an actual play, a cut down version. It's not today, you think, again, you don't think of the movie, you think of the TV series. So
TV
this
show,
isn't exactly.
Actually, I think of the movie too. I like the movie. I'll usually watch it once or twice a year. Literally, I've been watching it for years. And there's that big football game that they have at the end, which is kind of fun to watch. And the movie's nuts. But I'll tell you what, the difference between the movie and the TV show is if I was shot and wounded, I would not want to go to the MASH movie, the movie from the MASH from the movie. I'd want to go to the MASH from the TV show because they were mean-spirited. I mean, like I said, it was of its time in the late 60s, early 70s, that hippie rebellion. They're a bunch of jackasses. I mean, honestly, Hawkeye and Trapper, and we forgot to mention John Shuck, who a lot of kids might know from the Klingon ambassador in the Star Trek movies. He plays the painless Pole, Walt Waldowski, who tries to kill himself. That's where the whole suicide is painless. Joanne Flug, who's a big-time 70s actress. She's in the movie MASH. She plays Lieutenant Dish, which was a different character on the TV show. There's a lot of people in that one. But Bruno Kirby makes an appearance in the very early episode. He throws the football to Radar. Radar appeared on all the episodes too. That would be the back of his head when the choppers would come in. That was from the first episode.
Once he left,
they got rid of that.
Him out.
They edited him out. In fact, all those years that they would zoom in on Hawkeye, it's because if they pulled back, Trapper John was on the other Jeep coming down the hill, but they just kind of zoomed in to save some money. And we forgot to mention some of the other supporting cast. Another guy who died was Sergeant Zale.
Yes.
Another actor named Kirby. That was Bruno Kirby's dad. He just passed away at like 90-something years old. He was the dad to Bruno Kirby, who kids might know from City Slickers and Godfather 2. He was around for years. Great actor, Bruno Kirby was. But he was in there too. I forgot to mention Lawrence Fishbourne is also appears in some of the episodes of early MASH, because I was just thinking of The Matrix. I'm like, who else is on MASH? A lot of people. I mentioned Patrick Swayze. He has one of the better roles. On there. He comes on way before Dirty Dancing.
Oh yes, my gosh, that was.
But what other merchandise you got? That I've got a can of MASH beer. Unlike the other things we try to do on the show, I can't drink it because I emptied it out years ago. But there's that.
You sort of think, okay, MASH isn't really a very toyetic. You know, it was hugely popular. And so what did they, there wasn't a lot of things. I had a lot of books. Unfortunately, there's some really good like episode guides that came out, which I had in my collection, but I've sold
the complete book of MASH. I had that.
This one I just got recently, which is the unofficial quiz book.
Oh, I didn't know that. You should ask me one, see if I know it. Because as we forgot to mention early on the show, and I don't know if we're going to put it up here today, that's actually my initials.
Oh, it is.
And a little story is because MASH was so popular in the 70s. I was a good Catholic schoolboy. My initials were Mitchell Anthony Halleck. I had to go get confirmation. I purposely chose a name from a saint that began with an S, Stephen, so I could have my initials be Mitchell Anthony Stephen Halleck, or MASH, only because I wanted my initials to be on TV all around the world every single day of the year, because I got a big ego. So that's why sometimes I write down Mitchell A.S. Halleck, or as my wife would say, you forgot the extra S. It's Mitchell A.S.S. Halleck. But anyway, yes, that's my name there too. So look at this. Here's a Hawkeye Pierce action figure, still on the card. And then on the back, you had the other characters. There's your Winchester.
Yep.
And you got Klinger, who's in a dress.
Yes.
Colonel Potter. And who else? We got Hawkeye, BJ, and I think we have a generic soldier.
Yeah, he came with the
it's Father Mulcahy.
He came with the chopper.
Yeah, Father Mulcahy actually, he looks like William Christopher.
I've got to say I actually only up until recently I thought these were Mego figures, because Mego were the ones that brought out they had the Love Boat, they had Starsky and Hutch, they had all these but these are actually from TriStar, which is
TriStar, which I never heard of.
So but
actually, no, there's a soldier that comes with the MASH Jeep.
Yeah, which is actually just the Alan Alda character, I think, painted.
Repainted. Then there's the chopper. And then look, you could have sent away and got your free patch.
Yeah.
Look at that. Should have got.
So I've got I remember we've got like the Royal
These
shows.
were not a big hit, by the way.
No.
We didn't mention that.
No.
These were on closeouts. I remember when MASH ended in '82, going to a store called Alexander's, and there was a whole table full of MASH figures for like $1. Nobody wanted them. Sorry. I don't even aftermarket on eBay. They're not that expensive. These things.
Yeah, they're still about 50,
fun,
60 bucks each. They're cool. We have a thing called like the Royal Agricultural Show every year. Basically, how much was that one?
Sold for $1.96 at Kmart originally.
That's pretty good.
That's the price.
And we used to have show bags, so that's where I got Star Wars show bags and things like that. They had a MASH show bag, and all that I've got left from that is one of these.
Dog tag
MASH. There we go. Hang on, I'll try and.
Yeah.
Yep. So
actually, you know what's kind of funny? As a kid. Oh, it's over there. I was gonna say.
There was a MASH play set, a MASH board game. So there's this MASH train set where basically it didn't really look. You had a play mat and you had a chopper and things in the train set.
I was gonna say, I remember some type of model set. It reminded me of like the flying wing model set from Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah, they did have that. And
yeah, where it was the helipad and the swamp and the tents and stuff like that.
And they had model kits as well. You could do that. And there was an Atari video game. MASH.
Really?
Yeah.
What did you do? Fly in with the chopper?
I think you fly the chopper and picked up people for the hospital, and then there was a few levels. Yeah.
Oh, I never saw that. Obviously, it wasn't that popular, but the board game
it came out a bit late. Like maybe came out 83, 84, maybe. So just after.
I was gonna say I have thought about getting the board game, but then I'm like, who's gonna play it with me too? But
I would.
It was.
I'll buy one too, and we can play
we can play over.
We can live stream it on Twitch. That'll be fantastic.
Oh, we'll break the internet. That's for sure. Yeah, but I'm trying to see some of the other things that they had too back in the day. It was on the cover of Mad Magazine. I know I have one around here somewhere. Crack Magazine. There was a cartoon that ran in the 70s called Mush, which was horrible. It was about dogs up in Alaska at a army base or something.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know why. It only ran for a couple episodes. It was on Uncle Croc's Block.
Oh, with Charles Nelson Riley.
Yeah, that was the show.
I loved Uncle Croc's Block. I thought no one remembers that show.
No, I only remember because Mush was on it, and it was like they would have like instead of Hawkeye, they had like Eagle Eye, and Trapper was Trapper, and Frank Burns was Frank Sideburns. It was really bad. I don't even know if there's any episodes out there. There was another show that Gene Reynolds and Larry Gelbart did, which was called Rollout, which took place in World War II, which was being filmed on the same sets as the MASH set, which was about an African-American mobile motor pool.
Okay, I've never heard of that.
It looks just like MASH because they had the same costumes, they had the same sets, the same tent for the mess hall, and it ran for about 13 or 18 episodes. You can find it on YouTube.
Okay.
And it's got Garrett Morris, and I think I'm gonna say Louis Gossett Jr. Yep. There were some notable actors at the time that appear on Rollout. Ed Begley Jr. is on there. He's one of the main guys on there.
Of course.
And some of the other things we meant. Here's a real Sylvan for you. This is I used to wear this when I was a kid until I stopped. It was my dad's dog tag.
Oh wow.
From the Marine Corps. Whew. I don't know if you can see it, but the problem is with this is my dad was type O.
Yeah.
And he was in the United States Marine Corps. He was a Catholic. So most of that's cool. And we got the same names, except I threw the S in there. But somebody said, don't wear that because if you ever get in an accident, they'll think you're blood type O
yes.
instead of blood type B positive. And that could cause some problems in the hospital.
Your blood type is B positive. That sums you up perfectly.
Don't you know?
Yeah.
And the other
positive.
Thing is
B positive, Mitch.
Buddy. It's one of the rare blood types, buddy.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Hey,
you should we should talk about the spin-offs.
I am. I'm trying to get to
I know.
it,
I was just going to say, because we alluded to, what do you do when a show so popular ends? People still want to milk it for all it's worth, and that's when After MASH came along.
After MASH, which lasted mercifully only 2 seasons, 2 seasons, one and done, 2 and done. Follow the stateside adventures of Colonel Potter, Corporal Klinger, Father Mulcahy. I don't know. Even Radar showed up on an episode where he lost the farm and he came out, he was drunk, and it wasn't a good idea. And the first year, they tried to recreate that whole MASH thing. They had a character who was kind of like the Frank Burns Fink character, and that didn't work. And then they had this actor, I think it was Armand Asante, who came on, who was also in the movie Judge Dredd. And he came on as a doctor who had lost his leg during the Korean War, and he was kind of very bitter. He was a very good actor, and that was a decent character, but they wrote him out after the first season, And then the second season, they went for that wacky, let's buck the system and be irreverent and stuff. And it was too late by that point because they were up against the A-Team.
Yeah.
On a Tuesday night, and pity the fool that tries to beat Mr. T in the A-Team, and they didn't have a Lord's Prayer. The other spinoff.
I was just going to say, in its defense, it gets a bad rap, but it ran 2 seasons. Not too shabby for compared to MASH. Obviously, 11 seasons, but there was a lot of shows at that point. One less than if it didn't do well, they'd
ran longer than the McLean Stevenson show.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And then
go ahead.
Are you going to talk about Trapper
John? Yeah, Trapper John MD. Because I was just thinking another character we forgot to mention was Gregory Harrison, who played Dr. Gonzo Gates. He shows up on an episode of MASH, and then he'll go on to star on the show. But it's not with Trapper John; it's with actor Pernell Roberts, who was Candy on Bonanza, which ran for years. It was a Western. And that ran from 1978 to 1983. It
ran for quite a while. And I know there was, there was initially a lawsuit saying, you're using characters from MASH, the TV show. And then they were saying, no, we're actually using characters from MASH, the movie. So that was, thrown out. And after MASH, there was the pilot for Walter.
Ooh, Radar's pilot, where he becomes directed by Bill Bixby, no less, of the Hulk fame. And it's about Radar loses the farm. His wife runs off with his friend, and he moves to, I'm going to say St. Louis, maybe Missouri. He goes to the big town or whatever. He's not in Tumble, Iowa anymore. And he teams up with his cousin, and they become police officers.
Yep.
It's pretty bad. It's actually out there on YouTube. It only ran once.
It was it was a pilot, and it rated quite well.
It got picked up, but the funny thing is it didn't run across the whole country. It only aired in the eastern and the central part of the United States. The West Coast never saw Walter, which was written just like with the MASH stencil letters with the asterisk in the middle of it too, trying to get that Radar feel to it. But no, it didn't happen. It didn't happen. And I'm trying to think, what's so funny? I don't think they ran where you saw them, but for years there was a bunch of computer ads in the late 80s, which they would IBM computers, and they reunited the entire cast of MASH, and you would see commercials that had actors that were never on screen together. You would see Wayne Rogers with Harry Morgan or Frank Burns with Winchester and all these.
But they weren't playing. They weren't playing their MASH characters. They were just working in an office. And I've got to say, I saw those a couple of months ago on YouTube, and I'm going, oh, come on, are they going to bring? Come on, where's Alan Alder? Come on. And there is Alan.
Up. Yeah.
It's it's interesting. I thought it was quite good.
Alan Alda would do commercials. I think it was for the early Apple II or Prodigy or one of those. And he's so funny because he's showing how you could draw and color things in with a mouse click and all that. And it's so primitive by today's standards, but it was just like groundbreaking at the time. It's like Alan Alda's there with some little kid and she's teaching him how to use it. You know what's funny? They do a weird offshoot of Alan Alda as a doctor on the show. I think it was St. Elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And he plays an older doctor who was a Korean War veteran, and he's starting to lose. I think he's either getting dementia or Alzheimer's, or his hands are starting to shake. And it was all about how he can no longer be a surgeon because he had no more motor control.
That sounds like an episode of MASH where Colonel Potter, remember, he got the shakes and lost his confidence.
But it's Alan Alda's character, but off screen, he ends up killing himself. They don't show it, but you hear him like off screen. I think he shoots himself or something. But when they say he can't be a doctor anymore, they didn't call him Dr. Benjamin Franklin Pierce, but it was kind of like wink, wink, nod, nod.
Yep.
That's really Hawkeye, but we don't want to say it's Hawkeye. So it's kind of sad, but you can go Google that if you want to see.
Well, I choose to reject that. I'd like to think that he moved back to Crabapple Cove and had a successful practice, and is still practicing now. So
well, he would be like 100-something years old now, but it could happen.
Do it. He was like a Mark Twain of television, I think. So
maybe he drank from the Holy Grail and lived forever. But the funnier thing is, there was talk of like reunions for years when a lot of the cast was still alive. They would get together and do those reminiscent shows where they'd have the actors talk about, do you remember this? What was your favorite episode? Like that. but I think one of the MASH novels has like a reunion like years later where they get together and it's like, all these old army buddies. But it's one of those things I thought about sometimes if they rebooted it, if they did a whole new cast, who would you get to play those actors? At one point when Paul Rudd was younger, I thought he would have been a decent Hawkeye,
Oh yeah.
And I don't know who
I
could be
don't
a good
know.
Colonel
I don't know
Potter.
if you could. I don't know if it'll work. I don't know.
Really?
Yeah. Come
It's
up with
kind of
something
like never
new.
going to happen.
I think they need to
What?
come up with, something new. We've had so many medical dramas, and there's no replacing, those characters from MASH.
I'll tell you what, during this whole pandemic, I learned a lot of my cleanliness and how to take care of myself from germs from watching MASH. I was like, yeah, I know how you wash your hands really good. It's like scrubbing up. I was scrubbing my hands up to my elbows like I was about to do surgery in the OR.
Yeah.
And then wearing a mask was like nothing because it's like, well, they all wore masks unless
That's right.
Colonel Blake got killed and they walked in and said the announcement without a mask on.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was like common sense. It's like, yeah, there's no pandemic back in the Korean War because they were washing their hands and wearing masks and
That's
and
right.
social distancing all the time,
It's still educational and still funny. It's still
It's weird. It is kind of timeless though. I still watch it. It's on here in Hulu. And the funnier thing is they run them uncut because I did not realize how much was chopped up in syndication until I started watching them on Hulu, or I have the DVD box set.
Yep.
The shows would go about 30 minutes. They'd be like 28 minutes, but they'd run in syndication. They'd be hacked up to about 24 minutes so they can put more commercials in.
Yes.
There's whole scenes and characters that I've never seen that I'm watching these episodes like, hello, what is this?
Yeah.
It's like a brand new show all over again. And they look a lot better too. They've cleaned them up and the colors are brighter and there's all that fuzz is gone. And you're amazed how many actors have bright blue eyes on that show. It's like Alan Alda and Mike Farrell. Everyone's blue-eyed on there. So I don't know. It's one of the if it's not the best show of all time, I think it is.
Yeah, it's certainly in the top 10, and hovering close to number one, if not number one.
Right.
As we said, you can find it on Hulu. You can get DVD box sets. I don't think they've got a Blu-ray release or anything like that.
No,
but
you get it on iTunes. You can buy the
it's
seasons
available.
on iTunes.
It is a great show. There's a lot of episodes. There are so many, like we couldn't we sort of mentioned a few episodes that we like, but there's so many classic episodes out there.
Real quick,
hopefully
here's my
Oh
I was
yes.
gonna say real quick, here's my memorabilia. This is when I met Larry Linville.
That's cool.
There. He was at a car dealer. Again, this is kind of like sad. He was at a car dealership here in Branford, Connecticut, right up the road.
Yeah.
And I drove down the street and it was in the local papers. This was in the 80s. And it says, meet, actor Frank Burns from MASH, Larry Linville. And there was a helicopter going up and down in a parking lot. This is before, I guess, FAA rules.
Yeah.
Because like, why is there a chopper in the middle of a neighborhood over a street just landing? And they were giving free helicopter rides. And there Larry Linville was just sitting on a Buick.
Yeah.
And I walked right by him and I did a double take and I got to go back. And there was like maybe two people there. He said he was friends of the car dealership owner.
Yeah.
He was doing it as a favor, but it was a Saturday. It was in the summer. There was nobody out there but just him.
Yeah.
And this was before those conventions became a big deal and everybody could see it. And it was just like, oh, here's a guy who was on TV once. It wasn't a big deal. And he was one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. He did a tour for years. He'd go to college campuses and he would talk about his memories of MASH and working on the show. And he always had great stories about everybody.
Mhm.
One of the nicest guys you'll ever meet, even though he played a jerk,
was
Frank Burns. And again, too bad he died young, but he was a very talented guy. And here's the other one. Met Loretta Swit. She does a lot of animals. She's a big animal activist.
Yeah.
And the highlight as a kid was my mom, who would write to everybody, was getting stationery from Alan Alda. This is all the way from July 16th, 1980. This is 41 years old.
Yep.
Dear Mrs. Halleck, I'm sorry it's taken me so long to answer your letter, but I've been swamped. I hope Mitch enjoys this photo, and many thanks for taking the time to write. Sincerely yours, Alan Alda. And I've met Alan Alda, and that's his signature, buddy. It's on his stationery.
Yeah.
It's on this nice photo I got here. This is to Mitch, peace, Alan Alda. And it matches up. It's one of those things where you're like, well, that's not really his autograph.
It is. No, that is awesome.
It is. Yeah, he's a nice guy. He did a one-man show 10 years ago here in New Haven, right up the street. And it was like that episode where he gets a concussion and he's with the Korean family and he just stands up there and talks to himself for 40 minutes.
Yep.
That's the whole show. He was just up there talking about all the stories that are in his books, because he's written several books. And he's on a podcast too. We forgot to mention it. It's called like All Clear or Clear Channel or something.
In fact, I just subscribed to that, where he's got an extract from where he's speaking with, I think it is Mike Farrell and Loretta Swit. There's a lot of great.
And Jamie Farr shows up. Yeah.
There's a lot of great podcasts, a lot of great information out there.
One of the best podcasts you can listen to is one called MASH Matters that actually has Igor on it, Jeff Maxwell, who was on the show. He comes on every 2 weeks. They have a new episode, and they'll talk about all the, remembrance. They'll have cast members. They had Gary Berghoff on. They had the late Kelly McNamara. I think I said her name wrong. Yeah. Who played Nurse Kelly. She passed away of cancer this last year. And they had Loretta Swit come on. They had Mike Farrell come on. Alan Alda was just on it. So that's a great podcast. And then there's another one called MASHcast. There's a lot of MASH podcasts that I think about it. So it's still alive.
Hopefully if you hadn't been a fan of MASH, you watch our show and you may be inspired to listen to some of those or watch some of those episodes. I'd certainly recommend it. It is it's a very great, hang on. It's a very good show, and you can really put your mask on, Mitch. I'm starting to cough up. Hopefully not blood. Hey, Mitch.
Yes.
If you want to subscribe to Mitch and Ed's Excellent Adventure, what do you do again?
You just simply click on that button. I'm steaming up. You click on that button down there to subscribe, and you'll be notified. And hit the like button too. If you just say, "Hey, look at those two guys."
And don't forget to put down your comments. What's your favorite MASH episode? Do you have a favorite character? Or is there a topic that you want us to talk about? We always are happy for your suggestions. We've got some really good episodes in the pipeline. What do you got there, Mitch?
I was just going to drink some more now that the show's over with. So
that's all right. Well, I'm going to, hopefully I won't choke the chicken, if you know what I mean. I will talk to you next episode. This is Ed Dollister.
Look, there's a hint for a future episode. It's my Blade Runner booze.
That'll be good.
This has been Mitchell A.S. Halleck.
That's right. MASH to his friends, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.